I'm Maya Torres, and I never thought my own sister would be the one to teach me that family loyalty is just another word for convenient manipulation. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about a stolen birthday party. It's about finally learning to put myself first in a family that taught me I always came second. Growing up in our sun-bleached coastal town of Monterey Bay, Clara and I were the Torres sisters, who seemed to have it all. Our parents, Elena and David, ran a successful art gallery that catered to tourists seeking authentic local pieces. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, matching sundresses for church, coordinated Christmas cards, and enough charm to make the neighbors envious. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But behind our carefully curated family photos, a different story played out. Clara, 3 years older and infinitely more confident, had mastered the art of taking what she wanted while making it seem like an act of love. When I was 12 and saved for months to buy a vintage camera from the antique shop downtown, Clara admired it so effusively that our mother suggested I share it with her. Within a week, it had become Clara's camera, and I was praised for being so generous with your sister. "Maya, you're so good at supporting others," Mom would say, stroking Clara's hair as she posed with my camera. "That's a real gift." The pattern continued through high school. When I made varsity track, Clara suddenly discovered her passion for running and convinced our parents to hire her a private coach. When I won a scholarship to study marketing at UC Santa Barbara, Clara decided she wanted to be an entrepreneur and charmed her way into a business program with our parents' financial backing. Each time I was expected to celebrate her success, while my own achievements became footnotes in the family narrative. After college, I channeled my detail-oriented nature into a project coordinator role at Coastal Marketing Solutions, a mid-sized firm that handled campaigns for local businesses. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was steady and I was good at it. Clara, meanwhile, cycled through a series of ventures, a boutique that lasted 6 months, a food truck that never got off the ground, and most recently, some vague consulting business that seemed to exist primarily on social media. Despite her string of failures, Clara always landed on her feet, usually with our parents' help or by leveraging her extensive network of admirers. She had a gift for making people want to rescue her, batting her eyelashes and speaking in that breathless way that made grown men fall over themselves to solve her problems. I, on the other hand, had learned to rely on myself, which is why when my 27th birthday approached, I decided to do something I'd never done before: throw myself a party that was entirely about me. The idea came to me during a lunch break, sitting on the pier watching the waves crash against the rocks below. I'd been saving money religiously for 2 years, putting aside a portion of every paycheck into what I privately called my someday fund. Originally, it was meant for a down payment on a condo, but as my birthday approached, I realized I'd never celebrated myself properly. Every milestone had somehow become about someone else. That's when I discovered Azure Rooftop, the newest event venue in town. Perched on the 7th floor of a renovated warehouse, it offered panoramic views of Monterey Bay and the kind of sophisticated atmosphere I'd only dreamed of. The space could accommodate 50 people, had a full bar, and most importantly, it was mine if I wanted it. The booking consultation with their event coordinator felt like stepping into a different version of my life. "Your vision sounds lovely," Diana Martinez said, pulling up availability on her tablet. "We have Saturday, August 12th available. It's one of our premium dates. Sunset views are spectacular that time of year." The price made me swallow hard. $3,000 for the venue rental, plus catering minimums and service fees. It would consume nearly half of my savings. But as I looked out at the view, imagining my carefully chosen guest list toasting to my future under string lights, with the ocean stretching endlessly beyond, I knew it was worth it. "I'll take it," I said, my hands trembling slightly as I signed the contract. For 6 weeks, I planned every detail with the same precision I brought to my work projects. I designed elegant invitations on cream cardstock, researched caterers who could accommodate my friend Sarah's gluten sensitivity, and even splurged on a dress that made me feel like the sophisticated woman I was becoming. The guest list included my closest friends from college, my work colleagues, and yes, my family, because despite everything, I still wanted to believe they could be happy for me. The party was 3 weeks away when everything started to unravel. I should have known something was wrong when Clara started asking detailed questions about my party. It began innocuously enough: sisterly interest in my dress choice, curiosity about the menu, casual inquiries about the guest list. But Clara's questions had an intensity that made me uncomfortable, like she was taking mental notes rather than making conversation. "It sounds so sophisticated, Maya," she said during one of our weekly coffee dates, stirring her oat milk latte with theatrical precision. "I can't believe you're spending so much on yourself, though. Isn't that a little selfish?" The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. The accusation that had followed me through childhood whenever I dared to want something for myself. "It's my birthday," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "And it's my money." "Of course it is," Clara said quickly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I just worry about you making such a big financial commitment. What if something unexpected comes up?" I pulled my hand away. "Like what?" "Oh, life. It has a way of surprising us." 2 days later, I got a call from Diana at Azure Rooftop. Her voice was carefully professional, but I could hear the discomfort underneath. "Maya, I'm calling about your event on August 12th. I'm afraid there's been a complication." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complication?" "Well, it seems there was an error in our booking system. The date you reserved is actually already committed to another client, a corporate event that was booked months ago." I stared at my cubicle wall, where I'd pinned the signed contract as motivation. "That's impossible. I have a signed agreement." "I understand this is frustrating," Diana continued, her voice strained. "The other client has offered to compensate you for the inconvenience. They're willing to cover your deposit in full, plus an additional $500 for the trouble." Something cold settled in my chest. "Who is the other client?" There was a pause. "I'm not at liberty to—" "Diana, who is the other client?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Torres Events and Consulting." The world tilted. Torres Events and Consulting was Clara's latest venture, the one that existed primarily as a logo on her Instagram bio and a handful of posts about creating unforgettable experiences. She had no corporate clients. She barely had an actual business. "I need to call you back," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands shaking as I dialed Clara's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Maya, perfect timing. I was just thinking about you." "What did you do?" "What do you mean?" But I could hear it now, the slight tremor that meant she was lying. "Azure Rooftop, Clara. What did you do?" A sigh, dramatic and put upon. "Oh, that. Look, Maya, I can explain. An incredible opportunity came up for my business launch party and—" "Your business launch party?" "Yes. Some potential investors heard about my consulting work and they want to meet in a sophisticated setting. This could change everything for me, Maya. You understand, don't you?" I understood perfectly. I understood that once again, Clara had decided her needs were more important than mine. I understood that she had somehow convinced the venue to cancel my booking with me. I understood that my parents would expect me to be supportive, to put family first, to be grateful that Clara was finally getting her big break. "How?" I asked. "How what?" "How did you get them to cancel my booking?" Another pause. When Clara spoke again, her voice had shifted, becoming sharper, more calculated.
I told them the truth, Maya, that there had been a family miscommunication about who was booking the venue, that as the older sister with an actual business to launch, I was the intended client. They were very understanding. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She had waltzed into Azure Rooftop, probably wearing one of her designer outfits and that disarming smile, and convinced them that I was some confused younger sister who had overstepped her bounds. Maya, are you there? I have a signed contract.
The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. The accusation that had followed me through childhood whenever I dared to want something for myself. "It's my birthday," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "And it's my money." "Of course it is," Clara said quickly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I just worry about you making such a big financial commitment. What if something unexpected comes up?" I pulled my hand away. "Like what?" "Oh, life. It has a way of surprising us." 2 days later, I got a call from Diana at Azure Rooftop. Her voice was carefully professional, but I could hear the discomfort underneath. "Maya, I'm calling about your event on August 12th. I'm afraid there's been a complication." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complication?" "Well, it seems there was an error in our booking system. The date you reserved is actually already committed to another client, a corporate event that was booked months ago." I stared at my cubicle wall, where I'd pinned the signed contract as motivation. "That's impossible. I have a signed agreement." "I understand this is frustrating," Diana continued, her voice strained. "The other client has offered to compensate you for the inconvenience. They're willing to cover your deposit in full, plus an additional $500 for the trouble." Something cold settled in my chest. "Who is the other client?" There was a pause. "I'm not at liberty to—" "Diana, who is the other client?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Torres Events and Consulting." The world tilted. Torres Events and Consulting was Clara's latest venture, the one that existed primarily as a logo on her Instagram bio and a handful of posts about creating unforgettable experiences. She had no corporate clients. She barely had an actual business. "I need to call you back," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands shaking as I dialed Clara's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Maya, perfect timing. I was just thinking about you." "What did you do?" "What do you mean?" But I could hear it now, the slight tremor that meant she was lying. "Azure Rooftop, Clara. What did you do?" A sigh, dramatic and put upon. "Oh, that. Look, Maya, I can explain. An incredible opportunity came up for my business launch party and—" "Your business launch party?" "Yes. Some potential investors heard about my consulting work and they want to meet in a sophisticated setting. This could change everything for me, Maya. You understand, don't you?" I understood perfectly. I understood that once again, Clara had decided her needs were more important than mine. I understood that she had somehow convinced the venue to cancel my booking with me. I understood that my parents would expect me to be supportive, to put family first, to be grateful that Clara was finally getting her big break. "How?" I asked. "How what?" "How did you get them to cancel my booking?" Another pause. When Clara spoke again, her voice had shifted, becoming sharper, more calculated. "I told them the truth, Maya, that there had been a family miscommunication about who was booking the venue, that as the older sister with an actual business to launch, I was the intended client. They were very understanding." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away.
She had waltzed into Azure Rooftop, probably wearing one of her designer outfits and that disarming smile, and convinced them that I was some confused younger sister who had overstepped her bounds. Maya, are you there? I have a signed contract.
And you'll get your money back, plus extra. Really, Maya, this is better for everyone. You were spending way too much on a birthday party anyway. Mom and Dad think so too. Of course they did. Of course, Clara had already enlisted their support, framing this as an intervention to save me from my own poor judgment. I have to go, I said. Maya, don't be like this. We're family. My success is your success. When this business takes off, I hung up. I called in sick the next day, something I'd never done unless I was actually dying. Instead of going to work, I drove to the pier and sat on the same bench where I had first dreamed of my perfect party. The waves crashed below, indifferent to my misery, and I let myself cry for the first time since I was 13 years old. But as the tears dried and the sun climbed higher, something else began to take their place. Anger. Pure, white-hot rage at being treated like a disposable supporting character in my own life. I was 27 years old, financially independent, and successful in my own quiet way. I was done being the understanding little sister who stepped aside so Clara could shine. I wiped my eyes, pulled out my phone, and started making calls. My first call was to Diana at Azure Rooftop. I want to speak to your manager, I said. Maya, I understand you're upset, but the decision has been made. Miss Torres was very persuasive about the family business arrangement. There was no family arrangement. My sister lied to you. I have a signed contract, and unless you can prove that contract is invalid, you're in breach of agreement. There was a long pause. Let me transfer you to Mr. Lee, our owner. Raymond Lee had the kind of voice that suggested he'd dealt with difficult situations before. Ms. Torres, I apologize for the confusion. Your sister was quite convincing about the family business arrangement. Because she's a professional manipulator, I said. Mr. Lee, I don't know what story she told you, but I can prove every detail of my original booking. I have emails, bank records showing my deposit, even photos I took during our initial consultation. What proof did she provide of this supposed family business? Another pause. She had very detailed knowledge of your original plans. Of course she did, because I trusted her with every detail, the way sisters are supposed to trust each other. Mr. Lee, I'm not asking you to cancel her event. I'm asking you to honor the contract you signed with me first. Surely a venue of your caliber has policies against this kind of situation. Well, yes, we do. But your sister's event is much larger. She's bringing in significant catering revenue. How much larger? I'm not sure I should. Mr. Lee, if you don't honor my contract, I'll be forced to take legal action. My boyfriend is a lawyer, and he's already reviewed my documentation. This was a lie. I didn't have a boyfriend and I couldn't afford a lawyer, but my voice carried the confidence I'd learned from years of project management. Let me call you back, he said. While I waited, I did something I'd never done before. I investigated my sister. Using the same research skills that made me valuable at work, I dug into Clara's supposed business launch. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Torres Events and Consulting existed primarily on social media. Clara's LinkedIn claimed she'd organized high-profile corporate retreats and exclusive product launches. But when I reverse-searched the images she'd posted as her work, I found them on event planning stock photo sites. Her client testimonials came from fake accounts with generic names and stock photo profiles. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced her recent social media activity with public records. Clara had been posting about securing major investment and scaling her business.
But what I found was a trail of loan applications and credit inquiries that painted a very different picture. My sister wasn't just lying about having a successful business. She was drowning in debt and using increasingly desperate measures to maintain her facade. The investors she'd mentioned to the venue were likely more creditors, and her business launch party was probably a last-ditch effort to convince people she was successful enough to deserve their money. When my phone rang an hour later, I was ready.
And you'll get your money back, plus extra. Really, Maya, this is better for everyone. You were spending way too much on a birthday party anyway. Mom and Dad think so too. Of course they did. Of course, Clara had already enlisted their support, framing this as an intervention to save me from my own poor judgment. I have to go, I said. Maya, don't be like this. We're family. My success is your success. When this business takes off, I hung up. I called in sick the next day, something I'd never done unless I was actually dying. Instead of going to work, I drove to the pier and sat on the same bench where I had first dreamed of my perfect party. The waves crashed below, indifferent to my misery, and I let myself cry for the first time since I was 13 years old. But as the tears dried and the sun climbed higher, something else began to take their place. Anger. Pure, white-hot rage at being treated like a disposable supporting character in my own life. I was 27 years old, financially independent, and successful in my own quiet way. I was done being the understanding little sister who stepped aside so Clara could shine. I wiped my eyes, pulled out my phone, and started making calls. My first call was to Diana at Azure Rooftop. "I want to speak to your manager," I said. "Maya, I understand you're upset, but the decision has been made. Miss Torres was very persuasive about the family business arrangement." "There was no family arrangement. My sister lied to you. I have a signed contract, and unless you can prove that contract is invalid, you're in breach of agreement." There was a long pause. Let me transfer you to Mr. Lee, our owner." Raymond Lee had the kind of voice that suggested he'd dealt with difficult situations before. "Ms. Torres, I apologize for the confusion. Your sister was quite convincing about the family business arrangement." "Because she's a professional manipulator," I said. "Mr. Lee, I don't know what story she told you, but I can prove every detail of my original booking. I have emails, bank records showing my deposit, even photos I took during our initial consultation. What proof did she provide of this supposed family business?" Another pause. She had very detailed knowledge of your original plans." "Of course she did, because I trusted her with every detail, the way sisters are supposed to trust each other." "Mr. Lee, I'm not asking you to cancel her event. I'm asking you to honor the contract you signed with me first. Surely a venue of your caliber has policies against this kind of situation." "Well, yes, we do. But your sister's event is much larger. She's bringing in significant catering revenue." "How much larger?" "I'm not sure I should." "Mr. Lee, if you don't honor my contract, I'll be forced to take legal action. My boyfriend is a lawyer, and he's already reviewed my documentation." This was a lie. I didn't have a boyfriend, and I couldn't afford a lawyer, but my voice carried the confidence I'd learned from years of project management. "Let me call you back," he said. While I waited, I did something I'd never done before. I investigated my sister. Using the same research skills that made me valuable at work, I dug into Clara's supposed business launch. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Torres events and consulting existed primarily on social media. Clara's LinkedIn claimed she'd organized high-profile corporate retreats and exclusive product launches.
But when I reverse searched the images she'd posted as her work, I found them on event planning stock photo sites. Her client testimonials came from fake accounts with generic names and stock photo profiles. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced her recent social media activity with public records. Clara had been posting about securing major investment and scaling her business. But what I found was a trail of loan applications and credit inquiries that painted a very different picture. My sister wasn't just lying about having a successful business. She was drowning in debt and using increasingly desperate measures to maintain her facade. The investors she'd mentioned to the venue were likely more creditors, and her business launch party was probably a last-ditch effort to convince people she was successful enough to deserve their money. When my phone rang an hour later, I was ready.
Ms. Torres, this is Raymond Lee. After reviewing your contract and consulting with our legal team, we're prepared to honor your original booking. And my sister's event? Well, that's where things get complicated. She's already sent invitations, and we've received deposits for catering. I took a deep breath, and in that moment, something shifted inside me. The Maya who would have stepped aside for family peace was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the only way to stop being stepped on is to refuse to lie down. Mr. Lee, I have a proposition for you. And that's when I began planning the most important party of my life. Not my birthday celebration, but Clara's downfall. What kind of proposition? Raymond Lee asked, his voice cautious but intrigued. I stared out at the ocean, watching a fishing boat navigate the morning swells, and felt something crystallize inside me. For 27 years, I'd been the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who stepped aside. But responsibility could be a weapon, and understanding could be strategic. Mr. Lee, I want to buy Azure Rooftop. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Raymond cleared his throat. Ms. Torres, I'm not sure I understand. I mentioned you've been considering selling. Your website lists the property as exploring new ownership opportunities. I want to make an offer. That listing is, well, it's been up for 6 months with no serious increase. The hospitality industry is challenging right now, and this is a significant investment. I'm serious, I interrupted, and I have resources you might not expect. This was partly true. My someday fund had grown to $38,000 over 2 years of careful saving. It wasn't enough to buy a venue outright, but it was enough to make people take me seriously. More importantly, I'd spent 3 years at Coastal Marketing Solutions learning how local businesses actually made money, and I'd noticed something interesting about Azure Rooftop. Mr. Lee, can we meet this afternoon? I'd like to see the books and discuss terms. Another pause. Ms. Torres, purchasing a venue isn't like booking an event. There are licenses, insurance requirements, staff contracts. I understand. That's why I want to see everything before I make a formal offer. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already made another call to Noah Alvarez. Noah ran Coastal Catering, the company that handled most of Azure Rooftop's events. We'd worked together on several marketing campaigns, and I'd always been impressed with his business acumen and his genuine warmth. More importantly, I'd noticed the way he looked at me during our meetings. Not like Clara's admirers who wanted to rescue her, but like someone who saw competence and liked what he saw. Maya, Noah's voice carried surprise when he answered, this is unexpected. How's the party planning going? That's actually why I'm calling. Noah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. How much do you know about Claire's business launch party? A pause. She contacted me about catering. Why? What did she tell you about her budget? Another pause, longer this time. Maya, I'm not sure I should. Noah, she stole my venue booking. She convinced Azure Rooftop that there was some family mix-up and took my date for herself. I'm trying to understand how deep this goes. Jesus, Maya, I'm sorry, I had no idea. So, what did she tell you about money?
She said she was working with investors who would handle payment after the event. She wanted me to prepare for 75 people with a premium menu, probably $4,000 in catering costs. When I asked for a deposit, she said her financial backing didn't work that way. My stomach clenched. Did you agree to that?
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Hell no. I told her I needed 50% down within a week or I'd have to pass. She got intense about it. Started talking about family loyalty and how this was a big opportunity for both of us. Family loyalty, I repeated, tasting the bitterness. Maya, there's something else. She asked me a lot of questions about Azure Rooftops operations. How busy they are, what their profit margins might be, whether I thought Raymond Lee was looking to sell. It felt like she was fishing for information. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of information? Business intelligence, the kind you'd want if you were thinking about making an offer on the property. I closed my eyes, pieces clicking into place. Clara hadn't just stolen my party. She'd been planning something bigger, something that involved owning the venue herself. Noah, I need another favor. Can you meet me at Azure Rooftop this afternoon? I'm going to look at their books, and I could use someone who understands the catering side of the business. Why? I took a deep breath. Because I'm going to buy the place before she can. The meeting at Azure Rooftop revealed exactly what I'd suspected. Raymond Lee was tired, stressed, and increasingly desperate to sell. The venue was beautiful, but it was bleeding money due to high overhead and inconsistent bookings. The location is premium, he explained, spreading financial statements across the conference table, but the market is challenging. We need someone with both capital and marketing expertise to make this work. Noah leaned forward, studying the numbers. Your catering partnerships are underutilized. You're only booking about 60% capacity, but most of your events are small parties that don't need the full space. Exactly, Raymond said. We need someone who can diversify corporate events, weddings, private parties, someone who understands how to market to different demographics. I felt my pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of challenge I'd been handling at Coastal Marketing Solutions for 3 years. What's your asking price? $350,000, but I'd consider owner financing for the right buyer. My savings were a drop in that bucket, but owner financing meant I wouldn't need traditional bank approval. If I could prove I had the business plan and the marketing expertise to turn the venue around, Raymond might be willing to work with me. I need to see everything, I said. Revenue projections, expense breakdowns, staff contracts, licensing requirements, and I want to know about any other interested buyers. Raymond and Noah exchanged glances. There's only been one other serious inquiry, Raymond admitted. Someone who approached me last month about a potential partnership. They wanted to lease the space for their own events while maintaining booking rights for other clients. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Your sister, actually. Small world, right? That evening, I sat in my small apartment overlooking the harbor, surrounded by printouts of financial statements and business plans. My laptop displayed 17 browser tabs. Articles about restaurant licensing, small business loans, event venue profitability, and marketing strategies for hospitality businesses. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was playing chess instead of checkers. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Can we talk? I heard you met with Raymond today. Of course she'd heard. Monterey Bay wasn't big enough to keep secrets, especially when those secrets involved venues, caterers, and family drama. Instead of responding, I called Noah. How did your afternoon go? He asked. Enlightening. Noah, I have a proposition for you, too. I'm listening.
If I buy Azure Rooftop, I want you as my catering partner. Not just contracted services, I want you to have a stake in the business. Your expertise, my marketing background, Raymond's transition support. Maya, he paused. That's a big leap. Are you sure you're not just reacting to what Clara did? Maybe I am reacting, but maybe that's exactly what I should have been doing all along. What do you mean? I looked out at the harbor, where lights were beginning to twinkle on the fishing boats. I've spent my whole life being the reasonable one, the one who steps aside when someone else needs something more, the one who doesn't make waves. And where has that gotten me? I'm 27 years old, I make decent money, I'm good at my job, and my own sister thinks she can just take whatever she wants from me because I'll never fight back. And now you're going to fight back? I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to win. The next morning, Clara was waiting in my office parking lot, leaning against her BMW with the casual elegance that had always made me feel underdressed. Maya, we need to talk. I'm busy, I said, walking toward the building entrance. This is important. She fell into step beside me, her heels clicking against the pavement. Dramatic? Yes. Look, I know you're hurt, but this business launch could change everything for our family. When I start making real money, I can pay you back for all the party expenses, plus interest. When you start making real money? I repeated. Yes. Maya, you don't understand how business works. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Sometimes you have to take risks, like taking out loans under fake business names. Clara's face went very still. What? I did some research, Clara. Torres Events and Consulting has exactly 3 clients, all of whom paid you less than $500 for social media consulting. But you've applied for business loans totaling $23,000 in the last 6 months. How do you... I tracked down 2 of the investors you mentioned to Raymond Lee. They're not investors, Clara. They're creditors, people you owe money to who are getting tired of waiting for payment. Clara's composure cracked slightly. Maya, you don't understand the complexity. I understand that you're drowning, and you thought you could use my party venue as some kind of Hail Mary to convince people you're successful enough to keep lending you money? That's not... I also understand that you've been planning to make an offer on Azure Rooftop yourself. You've been pumping Raymond for information, trying to figure out if you could somehow leverage your way into ownership. Clara stared at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something like fear in her eyes. Maya, you're my sister. We should be working together, not against each other. You're right. We should be. But you made that impossible when you decided my dreams were less important than your desperation. I started walking toward the building again, but Clara grabbed my arm. Wait, Maya, I'll fix this. I'll call Raymond and tell him there was a mistake. You can have your party back. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. It's too late for that. What do you mean? I mean, I'm buying Azure Rooftop. The whole thing. Clara's face went white. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. You'd be surprised what I can do when I stop limiting myself to what you think I deserve.
I pulled my arm free and walked into the building, leaving Clara standing in the parking lot. Through the glass doors, I could see her fumbling for her phone, probably calling our parents to report that I'd lost my mind. Let her call them. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what anyone in my family thought about my choices. The next week passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. I took 3 personal days from work, something I'd never done, and threw myself into due diligence with the same focus I'd once reserved for other people's projects. Noah proved to be an invaluable partner. His catering business was profitable and well-established, which strengthened my proposal to Raymond. More importantly, he understood both the operational challenges and the income potential of event venues. The numbers actually work, he said, reviewing my business plan over coffee. If we can increase bookings to 80% capacity and diversify the event types, this could be really profitable. If, I said. Maya, you've been marketing local businesses for 3 years. You know this market better than almost anyone, and I know the food service side. Between us, we have most of the expertise we need. What we didn't have was enough capital for a traditional purchase, but Raymond's willingness to consider owner financing opened possibilities I hadn't expected. He's motivated to sell, my hastily hired attorney explained during our consultation. And your proposal includes keeping him on as a consultant for the first year, which reduces his risk. If you can come up with $50,000 for a down payment and prove you have the cash flow to make monthly payments, he might go for it. $50,000. I had $38,000 in savings, which meant I needed to find $12,000 more. That's when Noah made an offer that changed everything. I want to be your partner, he said. Not just the catering contractor, an actual partner. I'll put up $20,000 as my buy-in, and we'll split ownership 60-40 in your favor. Noah, I stared at him across his office table, surrounded by catering menus and invoices. That's a huge risk for you. Is it? Maya, I've been watching you work for 3 years. You're the most competent person I know. You finish projects on time, under budget, and you make everyone around you better at their jobs. If anyone can turn Azure Rooftop into a success, it's you. But what if I can't? What if this is just me being vindictive about Clara? Noah leaned back in his chair, studying me. Are you being vindictive? I considered the question seriously. Maybe partially, but Noah, I've been playing small my whole life. I've been so focused on not taking up too much space that I forgot I deserve to take up any space at all. And now? Now I want to build something that's mine. Something Clara can't take, something my parents can't diminish, something that proves I'm capable of more than just supporting other people's dreams. Noah smiled. Then let's do it. That afternoon, we made our formal offer to Raymond Lee. $50,000 down, owner financing for the remaining $300,000, with Noah and me as equal partners in operations and a structured payment plan that accounted for seasonal revenue fluctuations. Raymond's response came faster than I'd expected. Miss Torres, Mr. Alvarez, I'm pleased to accept your offer. When can we meet to discuss the transition timeline? I sat in my car outside Noah's office, staring at the acceptance email, and felt something I'd never experienced before. The weight of ownership, the responsibility of making decisions that would affect not just me, but employees, clients, and my business partner. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. My phone rang. Clara's name appeared on the screen. Maya, we need to talk, now. I'm busy. Mom and Dad are flying down from San Francisco. They want to have a family meeting about this situation.
I looked out at the harbor, where the afternoon light was painting the water gold. What situation? You know what situation. Maya, you can't buy Azure Rooftop. It's insane. You don't know anything about running a business. I know more than you do. That's not, Maya, listen to me. I've been working on a deal that could solve all of this. I found some investors who are willing to back a partnership between us. We could co-own the venue, combine our expertise. What expertise? I asked. My business development experience? Clara, you don't have a business to develop. You have debt and lies and a social media account. Maya, please don't do this to our family. I ended the call and turned off my phone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let family guilt change my mind. The venue would be mine, and Clara would have to find another way to solve her problems, preferably one that didn't involve stealing from the people who loved her. 2 hours later, I was signing papers that made me a business owner. The war was just beginning. The papers were still warm from the printer when my parents arrived in Monterey Bay. Mom had called in favors to get Dad away from his gallery commitments, and their urgency told me everything I needed to know about how Clara had framed the situation. They insisted on meeting at Paradiso, the upscale Italian restaurant where our family had celebrated every major milestone since I was 12. The choice was deliberate. Mom's way of invoking the weight of family history and shared memories. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a corner booth where I could see the entire dining room. Old habits from years of project management. Always control your environment when possible. Always know who's in the room. Dad entered first, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed and his expression set in the careful neutrality he wore when mediating between his daughters. Mom followed, elegant in the understated way that came from decades of running an art gallery. Her silver hair swept back and her jewelry carefully chosen to suggest prosperity without ostentation. Clara was last, and she dressed for battle. Designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, perfect makeup that emphasized her wide, innocent eyes, and the subtle vulnerability that had been getting her out of trouble since childhood. "Maya, sweetheart," Mom said, sliding into the booth across from me, "you look tired." "I've been busy," I replied, accepting her kiss on the cheek while noting the careful way she examined my face, as if looking for signs of mental instability. Dad sat beside me, his hands folded on the white tablecloth. "Clara tells us you've made some significant financial decisions recently." "I've purchased a business, yes." "Without consulting your family," Clara adding with the casual intimacy that had always made me feel trapped. "Maya, we're worried about you." I looked around the table at these three people who had shaped my entire understanding of myself and felt something shift inside my chest. They weren't just my family. They were people with their own agendas, their own blind spots, their own needs that didn't necessarily align with mine. "What exactly are you worried about?" I asked. Mom reached across the table to touch my hand. "Honey, buying a restaurant is an enormous risk. The hospitality industry is so volatile, and you don't have any experience." "It's an event venue, not a restaurant, and I have 3 years of marketing experience with local businesses, plus a partner who runs a successful catering company." "Maya, please, don't do this to our family. Don't do this to our family." I studied my sister's face, noting the way her eyes darted between our parents, checking their reactions. She was performing concern, the way she'd performed everything else her entire life. "You're right," I said. "I've never been impulsive. I've spent 27 years being careful, responsible, and considerate. I've put everyone else's needs before my own, and I've never asked for anything in return." "That's not true," Mom said. "We've always supported—" "You've always supported Clara," I interrupted. "When she wanted my bedroom, you moved me. When she wanted to join cheerleading after calling it stupid, you paid for private coaching. When she needed money for her business ventures, you provided it. When she stole my venue booking, you expected me to understand." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. "Maya," Clara said, her voice small and hurt, "I didn't steal anything. There was a miscommunication." "Stop," I said. "Just stop lying." "I know about the fake business, Clara. I know about the debt, the fraudulent loan applications, the way you've been spinning stories to anyone who'll listen about your success." Clara's face went white, but Mom leaned forward protectively. "Maya, even if Clara has made some mistakes—" "Mistakes?" I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. "Mom, she fabricated an entire business, took out loans she can't repay, and manipulated a venue into breaking their contract with me. Those aren't mistakes, that's fraud." "You don't understand the pressure she's been under," Dad said. "Starting a business is difficult." "I'm starting a business too. The difference is I'm doing it honestly." The server appeared to take our order, and we all smiled and pretended to be a normal family discussing wine choices and appetizers. But underneath the table, I could feel Clara's leg bouncing with nervous energy, and Mom kept touching her jewelry the way she did when she was upset. After the server left, Dad cleared his throat. "Maya, we think you should reconsider this purchase. If it's about money, we can help you find other investment opportunities. It's not about money." "Then what is it about?" Clara asked.
And for the first time, her voice carried genuine confusion instead of performance. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Beneath the perfect makeup and designer clothes, Clara looked exhausted. The kind of bone-deep tiredness that came from maintaining a lie that had grown too big to sustain. "It's about refusing to be invisible," I said. "It's about building something that belongs to me, something that represents my work and my vision and my capabilities. It's about proving to myself that I deserve to take up space in the world." "You were never invisible," Mom said softly. "Wasn't I? Clara gets the attention, the praise, the financial support. I get told I'm so good at supporting others and such a team player. Do you know what my biggest fear used to be?" They waited. "That if I ever asked for something just for me, you'd all realize I was selfish and stop loving me." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Maya, that's not... We never meant for you to feel that way. But I did feel that way, and now I've spent my own money, made my own decisions, and chosen my own partner, and the world didn't end. In fact, I feel more like myself than I have in years." "You don't understand what it's like. Being the one everyone expects to succeed. Being the one who has to be charming and confident and perfect all the time, because that's the only way people pay attention to you." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand that. But you don't understand what it's like being the one everyone expects to step aside." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 27 years of unspoken resentment settling between us. Finally, Dad spoke. "What do you need from us, Maya?" The question surprised me. I'd expected ultimatums, guilt trips, attempts to change my mind. I hadn't expected him to ask what I needed.
"I need you to let me try," I said. "I need you to believe that I'm capable of succeeding. And I need you to stop protecting Clara from the consequences of her choices." Clara flinched, but didn't argue. "And if you fail?" Mom asked. "Then I'll fail having tried something that mattered to me. That's better than succeeding at playing small for the rest of my life." The family dinner ended with careful hugs and promises to support each other through this transition, but I knew nothing had really been resolved. Clara's financial situation was still desperate, my parents were still worried about my impulsive decision, and I was still determined to prove that I could succeed on my own terms. What I didn't expect was for Clara's world to collapse quite so spectacularly. It started 3 days later when Noah called me at 7 in the morning. "Maya, you need to see the news." I pulled up the Monterey Herald website on my laptop and found the headline that would change everything. "Local entrepreneur under investigation for loan fraud." The article detailed how Clara Torres, owner of Torres Events and Consulting, was being investigated by both local authorities and federal lending institutions for allegedly submitting false information on multiple business loan applications. According to the report, she had claimed non-existent clients, fabricated revenue figures, and used falsified contracts to secure over $30,000 in small business funding. My phone started ringing immediately. First Mom, then Dad, then reporters who had somehow gotten my number and wanted to know if I had any comment about my sister's legal troubles. I turned off my phone and drove to Azure Rooftop. The venue was officially mine now, and I'd spent the last week working with Noah to plan our transition strategy. We were keeping most of the existing staff, upgrading the kitchen equipment, and developing a marketing plan that would position us as the premier event space on the Central Coast. But standing in the empty ballroom, looking out at the Pacific Ocean through floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt something I hadn't expected: sadness. Not for Clara's legal troubles, she'd created the situation herself, but for the family dynamic that had made both of us feel like we had to compete for love and attention instead of supporting each other's dreams. "You okay?" Noah appeared beside me, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cafe downstairs. "Define okay," I said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Your sister's situation doesn't change what we're building here," he said. "Doesn't it?"
Half the town probably thinks I'm just as dishonest as she is. The Torres sisters and their questionable business practices. Maya, you bought this place with legitimate financing and a solid business plan. Anyone who looks at the details will see the difference. I wanted to believe him, but I'd grown up in a small town. I knew how quickly reputation could spread, how family scandals could taint everyone with the same name. That afternoon, Clara showed up at the venue. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with her clothes or makeup. The confidence that had defined her entire personality was gone, replaced by something that looked like fear. "Maya, I need to talk to you." I was standing in the kitchen with our new head chef, reviewing menu options for our grand reopening event. "I'm working. Please, just 5 minutes." I excused myself and followed Clara to the main dining area where afternoon light streamed through the windows and illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble. I waited. "I'm sorry about the venue, about lying to Raymond, about putting you in the middle of my mess. I'm sorry about everything." "Okay."
"That's it? Just okay?" I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I'd learned to expect, but finding only exhaustion. "What do you want me to say, Clara?" "I want you to help me." And there it was. Even facing potential criminal charges, even having her fraudulent business exposed, she still expected me to rescue her. "How?" I asked. "I need a lawyer, a good one, and I need somewhere to stay. I can't afford my apartment anymore, and Mom and Dad are so disappointed they can barely look at me." "You want me to pay for your legal defense and let you move in with me?" "We're sisters, Maya. We're supposed to help each other." I laughed, and the sound echoed off the empty walls. "Now we're sisters. When you needed my venue, when you needed my reputation to legitimize your fake business, when you needed someone to step aside so you could take center stage, then we were sisters. But when I needed support for my dreams, when I needed my family to believe in my capabilities, where was the sisterhood then?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I know I messed up. I know I've been selfish, but I'm desperate, Maya. If you don't help me, I don't know what I'm going to do." "You're going to figure it out, the same way I've been figuring things out my entire life." "Maya, please!" "No." The word came out stronger than I had intended. "Clara, I love you, but I'm not going to sacrifice my future to clean up your mistakes. Not this time." She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You've changed." "Yes, I have." "You used to be nice." "I'm still nice, but I'm not desperate to be loved anymore, and I'm not afraid of people thinking I'm selfish for putting my own needs first occasionally." Clara left without another word, and I watched her walk to her BMW, which I now realize was probably leased with money she didn't have, and drive away. The grand reopening of Azure Rooftop was scheduled for the following Saturday. Noah and I had planned everything meticulously. A cocktail reception showcasing our new catering menu, tours of the renovated space, and presentations about our vision for making the venue the premier event destination on the Central Coast. We'd invited local business owners, wedding planners, corporate event coordinators, and members of the press. It was our chance to establish our reputation and distance ourselves from the scandals surrounding Clara's legal troubles. What I didn't expect was for Clara to show up. She appeared just as the reception was hitting its stride, when the room was full of laughter and conversation, and the golden hour light was painting everything in warm, forgiving tones. She dressed carefully, professional but not flashy, humble but not defeated, and she moved through the crowd with the same social grace that had always made her the center of attention. I was in the middle of a conversation with the event coordinator from the Monterey Bay Aquarium when I spotted her talking to Raymond Lee near the bar. My stomach clenched as I watched her lean in close, speaking with the kind of intensity that suggested she was making some kind of pitch. "Excuse me," I said to the aquarium coordinator and made my way across the room. "Maya!" Clara's smile was bright and brittle. "What a wonderful event! You should be so proud." "What are you doing here, Clara?" "I came to support my sister, of course, and to speak with some old friends about a business opportunity." Raymond Lee looked uncomfortable. "Maya, your sister was just explaining some changes to her situation." "What kind of changes?" I asked. Clara's smile never wavered. "I've restructured my business model. Instead of focusing on events consulting, I'm moving into venue partnership opportunities. I was just telling Raymond about my interest in establishing a collaborative relationship with Azure Rooftop." My blood turned to ice. A collaborative relationship?
Yes, given my experience in the industry and my existing client relationships, I think there could be real synergy between our businesses. I stared at her, understanding finally dawning. Even facing fraud charges, even having her lies exposed, Clara was still trying to find a way to insert herself into my success. She was trying to convince Raymond, and probably other people at the party, that she deserved a piece of what I'd built. "Clara, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course." I led her to the small office behind the kitchen, closing the door behind us. The sounds of the party became muffled, leaving us in sudden, sharp silence. "You need to leave," I said. "Maya, I'm trying to help." "You're trying to help yourself. You're trying to convince people that you deserve credit for my success, that somehow your failed business and my legitimate purchase are connected." Clara's composure finally cracked. "Fine. Yes, I need this, Maya. I need people to think I'm still viable, still worth investing in. My lawyer says if I can show that I'm actively involved in legitimate business opportunities, it might help with the sentencing." "So you thought you'd use my venue as your character reference?" "We're family. Your success reflects well on both of us." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw the truth I'd been avoiding for 27 years. Clara didn't love me. She loved what I could do for her. She loved how my reliability made her look more credible, how my stability made her chaos seem charmingly spontaneous, how my willingness to step aside made room for her to shine. "Get out," I said quietly. "Maya, I get out of my venue. Get out of my business. Get out of my life." "You don't mean that." "I absolutely mean that. Clara, I spent my entire childhood and most of my adult life believing that loving you meant letting you take whatever you wanted from me. But that's not love. That's exploitation." Clara's face went white. "I never exploited. You stole my birthday party venue. You tried to sabotage my business purchase. You lied to our parents about my decisions. And now you're trying to convince my guests and my business partners that you deserve credit for my work. What would you call that?" For the first time in my memory, Clara had nothing to say. "Leave," I said. "Now." She left. I stood in the small office for several minutes, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation from the reception, and felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete certainty that I'd made the right choice. When I rejoined the party, Noah appeared at my side immediately. "Everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," I said, and meant it. The rest of the evening was a success beyond my wildest expectations. We booked 3 weddings, 2 corporate events, and a dozen smaller parties. Local reporters asked thoughtful questions about our business model and our plans for the future. Wedding planners complimented our attention to detail and our competitive pricing. But the best moment came near the end of the night, when Raymond Lee approached me with a glass of champagne and a smile that seemed genuinely proud. "Maya, I want you to know how glad I am that you bought this place.
You're going to do incredible things here. Thank you, Raymond. That means everything to me. Your sister stopped by earlier. Interesting conversation. My stomach tightened. Oh?
She seemed to think there might be some confusion about her role in your business. I told her I was very clear about who the actual owner is. I felt a smile spreading across my face. Thank you. No thanks necessary. I've been in business for 40 years, Maya. I know the difference between someone who builds something and someone who tries to claim credit for other people's work. As the last guest departed and Noah and I cleaned up the remnants of our successful evening, I felt a peace I'd never experienced before. I'd built something that belonged to me. I'd proven my capabilities to myself and to others, and I'd finally learned the difference between family loyalty and self-destruction. Clara would have to find her own way forward. For the first time in my life, that wasn't my responsibility. The war was over, and I had won. 6 months later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of Azure Rooftop at sunset, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly toward the horizon. The venue had transformed under Noah's and my ownership into exactly what we'd envisioned, a sophisticated event space that captured the natural beauty of Monterey Bay while providing the elegant atmosphere our clients wanted. The numbers told the story of our success. We were booked solid through the following year. Our revenue had exceeded projections by 30%, and we'd expanded our services to include corporate retreats and multi-day wedding packages. More importantly, we'd created something that felt authentic, a business that reflected our values rather than someone else's expectations. "The Hartman wedding setup looks perfect," Noah said, joining me on the terrace. He carried 2 glasses of local Pinot Grigio, his tie slightly loosened after coordinating vendors all day. "Sarah outdid herself with the florals," I agreed, gesturing toward the ceremony space where white roses and eucalyptus created an elegant backdrop against the ocean view. Noah smiled. "You've changed, you know that." "How so?" 6 months ago, you would have been obsessing over every detail, checking your email constantly, wondering if you'd done something wrong. He was right. The Maya who had bought Azure Rooftop had still been seeking approval, still measuring her worth by other people's opinions. But running a successful business had taught me to trust my own judgment and define success by my own standards. I've learned to distinguish between caring about quality and needing validation, I said. Noah moved closer, and I felt the familiar flutter of attraction that had been building between us for months. We'd been careful to keep our relationship professional while establishing the business, but lately the boundaries had been shifting. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you." "About the business?" "About us." I turned to face him fully, noting the way the sunset light caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Noah, I know we agreed to keep things professional until we were established, but I've been watching you transform over these past 6 months, and I'm not just attracted to your competence anymore. I'm falling in love with your confidence." The words hung between us, honest and vulnerable. For 27 years, I'd believed that being loved meant being needed, that my value came from what I could provide for other people. But Noah was offering something different, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. "I'm scared," I admitted, "of trusting someone to see me as more than just useful." Noah took my hands. "Maya, you're brilliant, funny, and more resilient than anyone I've ever met. I fell for you long before we started working together." "I'd like to try," I said finally, "being someone's partner instead of someone's resource." Noah leaned down to kiss me, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely present in a moment that belonged entirely to me. The kiss was interrupted by my phone buzzing. I glanced at the screen expecting a vendor inquiry, but instead saw a text from an unknown number. "Maya, this is Clara. Can we meet? I have something to tell you." Noah noticed my expression change.
We hadn't spoken since the night of our grand reopening, when I'd thrown her out of my venue and my life. Through our parents, I'd heard that she'd
Guilty to fraud charges and received probation plus community service. She'd moved back home and was working as a hostess at a restaurant in San Francisco. "What do you want to do?" Noah asked. "Part of me wants to ignore it, but I'm curious about what she could possibly have to say now." "Whatever she wants, you don't owe her anything." "I know. That's what makes this different. 6 months ago, I would have met with her because I felt obligated. Now I'm considering it because I'm curious." Against my better judgment, I typed back, "Paradiso Restaurant, tomorrow at 2 p.m. The next afternoon, Clara arrived exactly on time, and I was struck by how different she looked. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair shorter, her face thinner. She moved with none of the performative confidence that had once defined her. "Maya, thank you for meeting me." "What do you want, Clara?" She slid into the booth across from me, hands shaking slightly. "I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not the kind where I tried to minimize what I did or explain why you should forgive me. I stole your venue booking because I was desperate and selfish. I tried to sabotage your business purchase because I couldn't stand the thought of you succeeding where I was failing. I spent our entire childhood taking things from you because it was easier than figuring out how to build something myself." The words were delivered without theatrical emotion. She looked exhausted but clear-eyed, like someone who had finally stopped running from the truth. "What changed?" I asked. Clara smiled, and for the first time in my memory, it looked genuine. "Therapy. Court-mandated at first, but I kept going. Turns out I had no idea who I was when I wasn't competing with you." "And now you do?" "I'm learning. It turns out I'm actually pretty good at customer service when I'm not trying to be the star of the show. My manager says I'm one of the most reliable employees she's had." I almost smiled. Reliability is a useful skill. "Maya, I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've built. I drive past Azure rooftops sometimes, and I see the lights from your events, and I think about how you took something terrible I did and turned it into something amazing. I also told Mom and Dad the truth about everything, about how I've been taking your things since we were children, about how they enabled it, about how wrong it was to steal your venue. They're working on understanding their part in all of this, too." This surprised me. How are they handling that? "Better than expected. Dad said he always knew I was getting away with too much. Mom is struggling more. She's having a hard time accepting that her attempts to keep peace actually made things worse." "What do you want now?" I asked. "To build something real. To stop being the kind of person who takes things from other people. To maybe someday have a relationship with you that isn't based on competition." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation, but finding only genuine vulnerability. This might be the first honest conversation we'd ever had. "Clara, I forgive you." Her eyes widened. "You do?" "Yes, not because you deserve it, and not because I want a relationship with you right now, but because forgiveness is about my peace of mind, not your redemption." "I understand. I'm glad you're getting help, but my forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to how things were. I wouldn't want that anyway. How things were was toxic for both of us." "There's something else," Clara said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small, wrapped package. Inside was my vintage camera, the one she'd shared when I was 12 and never returned. "I found it when I was packing to move home. I never even used it after that first year. I just kept it because it was yours, and taking your things had become a habit."